Hello and welcome to another episode of Transport in Africa, a weekly podcast dedicated to spotlight cutting-edge research, innovation, and ideas shaping transport systems across Africa. I am your host, Polycarp Chebe. In each episode, we sit down with a researcher, practitioner, or change maker who is redefining how mobility works in Africa. In today's episode, we are turning our focus to Kumasi, Ghana to talk about walking, not just walking as a mode of transport, but walking as a means of livelihood and a daily act of resilience for women. These women work to earn a living, carrying goods, navigating chaotic traffic, balancing caregiving responsibilities, and moving through the city with remarkable resilience. Yet, the daily realities of these women and other pedestrians in the informal sector are often overlooked in global conversations. To help us unpack this overlooked reality, we are joined by Taru N, a researcher whose work uses video recordings to shed light on the everyday realities of women street vendors in Kumasi, Ghana, offering powerful insights on how we understand walking in African cities. Hello, Taru. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Chepe. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to join you for this podcast, and thank you for asking me to come and tell you more about my work and my PhD research, and also hello to your audience.
Understand that you are not originally from Africa. Can you tell us a bit about your background and what inspired you to focus your research on women street vendors and working in Kumasi, Ghana?
Okay, yes, that's true. I'm an architect and urban planner, as well as a university teacher at Aalto University in Finland. I'm doing my PhD research is about walking and walking experience. In my work as an architect and urban planner, I have been focusing on walking, walkability, public life studies, and other projects connected to public transportation. And since 2009, I have been teaching at the Aalto University, supervising student projects globally. And I am part of the Aalto University's World in Transition Lab, where I do my self-funded PhD research that explores pedestrian experiences across geographies. So not only in Kumasi, but also elsewhere. I decided that I would like to pursue for a PhD. Walking was in the center of my interest. When I started reading the literature, the initial idea was to study walking experience, since I had noticed myself and my own experience from walking that it was changing quite a lot depending where and when and with whom I was walking. So I started exploring different methods to study walking, and I wanted not to stay on the observational level only, but to really got to know how people were experiencing walking. And I started my research in Helsinki. I did several walk-along interviews where I first walked with the research participants on their daily routes and interviewed them at the same time. And just to help myself to remember what they were saying and where they were saying, I recorded the walk. I started the recordings just with my mobile phone. And in Helsinki, I was able to walk side by side with the research participants and discuss that with them at the same time while we were walking. But I must say I wasn't that impressed with the results because I was not able to capture the essential and the experiences, which I thought were quite difficult for people to express with words while they were walking. So I had these recordings from the walking and talking. But then I was thinking that if the people would see the video from the walks, maybe they could express other things that they did not have time to reflect on while walking. And what was also very key to my study that I wanted to center walking as my research topic and also as the method. So I've been walking all these walks myself as well. And then, as I said, I read a lot of literature, which was quite frustrating, especially by some issues. I was just thinking that, first of all, why do we theorize about walking in the context where people don't really need to walk? And with this, I mean in Europe and North America, for example. We have always some other choices. If I want to go to work, for example, I need to walk only 7 minutes to get to the bus stop. And there is a lot of research about active mobility, cycling and walking, as they are seen carbon neutral ways of moving. And here in Europe and North America, the discussion revolves around getting the people out of the cars and walking. And it can be done if the design of the pedestrian environment is enjoyable. So I wanted to study actually the walking in a context where people walk the most, for example, in Africa, and with the people who walk the most, which is the women. And very often these people don't even have a choice like I have. So this was basically my initial idea. And as I said, I teach at Aalto University a course where we always take our students somewhere out of our own culture to do the field work. So when we were going to the field work in Ghana, in Kumasi, it was somehow a coincidence that I thought that, okay, I could do some walks also in Ghana and in Kumasi. And when I had observed what was going on in the city and on the streets, I realized that there are these women who walk a lot, and they are these street vendor women. And I thought, let me try to walk with them. So that's basically how the idea for my research came about. And of course, it is from my previous experience that I was living in Ghana and in Kumasi that we actually initiated this collaboration with the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Kumasi. And all that made this my research also possible.
Thank you very much, Taru, and interesting to hear how far you have come with this topic. Can you describe what a typical day looks like for a female street vendor in Kumasi in terms of how working patterns, where she goes, how far she walks, and what she carries?
First of all, I worked with these ladies that worked at the city center, close to the central market or the areas next to it. And for many of these street vendor ladies, a typical day is that after their morning household duties, they walk to the city center. Some of them carry what they sell from their homes, but some of them have a place at the city center where they will get their items, like drinks or fruits, for example. And also the lady who was selling ice kenke said that she had a place at the city center where she first comes to prepare the food. And after that, she starts selling. Some of these ladies, they start their daily walking already at 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning, and some after their kids have left to school. And these ladies, they walked between 6 to 11 hours a day and 6 days in a week. And they took breaks only if needed, sometimes stopping only to sell, but continuing walking for hours in the hot climate. Most of these ladies, they carry food items, some even clothes and some other small necessities that people might need during the day. And these ladies, when they walk around the central market and the areas nearby, they provide the snacks or drinks for the people who work at the market. And at the area that there are many different kind of manufacturing, like sandals, cutlasses, or other tools, and aluminum pots, drying, baking bread, and so on. So much of these functions that keep the city of Kumasi running. So these ladies are contributing to the livelihoods of the others by keeping them nourished and hydrated during their workdays. So they don't need to leave their jobs.
Having participated in these work sessions, both in Europe and in Kumasi, Ghana, Taru, how does working in Kumasi and more broadly in other African cities differ from working in other parts of the world, particularly in European cities?
Well, maybe I can only talk about Helsinki and Kumasi. And these experiences are, of course, very different because the weather and the temperature and the infrastructure are very different, as well as the number of people on the streets. And of course, like when you can walk, because there are the limitations given by the darkness, for example, or then when we have very snowy or icy conditions in Finland. What I thought was my most interesting finding was the space for walking. In Kumasi, or at least at the city center of Kumasi, it is very dynamic. It's constantly changing. Pedestrians, they renegotiate the space all the time. As the sidewalks are mainly taken by the sellers and goods to be sold, pedestrians walk along the streets next to the cars and in between the cars. For me, it required a lot of getting used to. For me, it was at first a bit frightening. But if I give you an example, that in Finland, if I go to walk on the street, the police will come and take me away because I would be disturbing the traffic. So it's very strictly defined where I am supposed to walk. I walk on the sidewalk, and if I want to cross the street, I have to cross the street from the zebra crossings. But in Kumasi, everything is entangled and organic. So each step taken is a contested or shared street, and it's an act of spatial negotiation where these pedestrians quietly yet powerfully reshape the hierarchies and redefine access and reclaim visibility. The cars, the pedestrians, motorcycles, they all have to adapt and give way to others. So there is this different kind of solidarity between them. But of course, there are lots of similarities, as in every condition and in every continent. Pedestrians are always the most vulnerable street users compared to the other modes of transport.
What was it like spending time with these women on the streets? Can you share some of the moments that really stuck with you?
Well, I cannot help but admiring these women. I walked with them from 1 hour up to 2 hours, and I was completely exhausted. I could not handle more than maximum 2 walks in a day. These ladies were so humble, yet so determined. It was essentially important for them to earn their own money and to support their children's school or provide food for them. These women are so strong, yet not to forget the kind of skills it requires to balance the goods on top of their heads and walking around the city. So that's why I called them urban acrobats. They really are. Most of them have been training ever since their childhood, balancing the goods on top of their heads. And it's also true that the walking has a physical toll. It is exhausting, and for them too, even though they are used to it and also used to the hot weather. Many of the women, they complain having neck, back, or hip pains, but still they continued walking every day. And even I was aware of the different neighborhoods in Kumasi before, and I know Kumasi quite well since 2001 when I lived there. I have followed how Kumasi has grown and developed ever since. But I had not been inside in these neighborhoods next to the central market, Kejetia and Alapar market before. And what stuck with me is the activity of these places, the way they keep the city running. These are really the production zones, providing many foodstuffs and everyday tools and objects that people need. And they are sold at the nearby markets. And the markets and these neighborhoods next to them are really the core of the city. I would call it the heart of the Kumasi that keeps it alive.
I understand that your study in Kumasi, Ghana is based on video recordings and analysis of women's working practices. How did you approach ethical consideration in recording and representing their stories? And how did the women respond to being filmed?
Yes, I have employed in my research the method called videography, which means that I've been video recording the walks. And I had several ethical considerations. In the beginning, my idea was not to film the women. The idea was to walk with them and film the walk. But then on my first test walk, I realized it was not possible to walk side by side and discuss with the ladies on the way. And the reason for this was the space. The places where these ladies walk, the space is limited. There are narrow alleyways and paths. It's not possible to walk side by side. In most of the cases, I would also need a translator, as most of these ladies spoke English, but still they preferred expressing themselves with their own language, Twi. So 3 people walking side by side was absolutely not possible. So I ended up walking behind the ladies. And of course, I asked the consent from them, and they have all agreed to take part of the research and be recorded. But I have been very careful also not to show their faces, not to show their interaction with their customers, so the moments that they sell. Very often on those moments, I stepped aside. I did not want to interfere or disturb their selling activities. And some of these routes that the ladies walked, I walked second time without them. So I have also the film where I am not filming the actual ladies. And as my idea was also to interview the ladies on the go, and it didn't work out, I ended up interviewing them after the walk. And the idea of the videography is that you can revisit the video, and you could also show the video to different audiences and interview them based on the video. So in this way, the video is not only a research data, but the way of theorizing and enabling a cyclical research process where different audiences can revisit and reinterpret what they see. And the video really well links the past and the present and makes the walking of these women visible. And one of the ideas of my research is also to make this walking visible. These women are very visible in the streets of Kumasi, but they are invisible, like also many of the other pedestrians are invisible in the transportation plans and budget.
It is really fascinating to hear how you were able to use this video recording in order to realize this study. From your experience, what did video recordings reveal that surveys or interviews might have missed in walkability literature?
Well, videography is an interpretive qualitative research method. So it combines focused ethnography with video analysis. And with focused ethnography, I mean a short data-intensive field periods instead of spending months and months observing the field. The video records the subtle but very complex social interactions while walking in the urban spaces and the way they happen naturally. So going to the field myself is also an integral part of this videography method. I also experience the walking in a multisensory manner with all my senses. Walking practices and all the interactions between other pedestrians and the environment and different car users are very complex and difficult to articulate by words. The literature captures one of our senses, but the video is able to capture at least 2 of our senses. It is very difficult to articulate in a text issues like emotions and experiences, what happens around the person who walks, how are the interactions, and what is the atmosphere of the places. So I think videography has been used before in social sciences and in the user and lifestyle studies before. So I walked with the body camera attached to me, and after the walk, I did my own field notes. As I said, this videography is also a cyclical research process. Compared to many linear research processes, it requires several cycles to work with the video footage. And I think that the videography is able to produce powerful encounters that challenge the viewer to engage with new ways of thinking and seeing, and even theorizing. And it can also allow a shared analysis. The urban interactions can be interpreted collaboratively, and it strengthens the reliability of the study as it can bring in multiple perspectives. So the researcher can revisit the video multiple times, and every time you see something new. I think the videography is a good tool to create knowledge and to theorize, and not only use the video as data or presenting device. For me, it was actually a way to extend the walk-along interviews, as the videography adds another layer of interpretation.
How does understanding the working practices of women street vendors help us rethink ideas of walking as a mode of transport in African cities and beyond?
Well, walking is a mode of transport, but it's not only that. It's so much more complex everyday practice. And as I was talking about the typical literature about walking from the global north context, is connected to many positive expectations. And it's quite well researched as well, as walking is seen as active travel mode, being climate friendly, carbon neutral way of moving. It has health benefits. Then there's lots of studies about cause and effect relationship of walking and built environment. And as Jenny Middleton in her book, Walkable City, Dimensions of Walking and Overlapping Walks of Life says, it romanticizes the walking as it positions it as accessible, democratic, inclusive urban practice. And the idea to make people walk more, we think that the pedestrian environment needs to be more attractive or enjoyable. And that's why we talk a lot about well-designed, walkable, high-quality, pedestrian-friendly, and so on, these kind of urban spaces. And I think there is a certain kind of bias here, that all these studies about walking are very Eurocentric and Western concepts so far. And they fail to capture other dimensions of walking that are maybe not even seen in these Western cities. And when I talk about the other dimensions of walking, I especially mean about this renegotiating the space, bottom-up urbanism, walking as a livelihood of service, walking as an act of care or solidarity, and a skillful performance like urban acrobatics. So I think urban walkability or walkable cities needs to be thought and researched more open-minded, so that we can revise, maybe stretch or rebuild and situate and include inputs from all regions of the world to these discussions. What is walkable city, and theorizing about walking.
Thank you very much, Taru. Before we wrap up this conversation, what message would you like to share with our listeners, perhaps about your research or your hopes for the future of African cities?
Thank you, Polycarp Chepe. I'm very grateful that you gave me this opportunity to talk about my research with you and your listeners. I think I would like to remind that very often the scientific research relies on problem-centric perspectives, which is insufficient for fully understanding the realities. It is almost like looking at one side of the coin or only half of the truth and ignoring the other half. But in a holistic approach, I think we require to examine also the successes, or what is good, or what is worth keeping or strengthening, thinking that what is enough rather than how much more we need, and giving also the voices to those whose voices are seldom heard, and making them visible who are usually left invisible. So there is so much good things going on in Africa, and I have learned a lot, and I have surprised many times about the resilience and the creativity of the people, and I see so much potential. So maybe my hope would be to challenge ourselves to actively open-minded thinking beyond the adopted or copied frameworks, not comparing, but engaging in diverse and hopeful narratives as well. So I strongly believe that better thinking creates better world.
brings us to the end of this episode of your weekly podcast on transport in Africa. Taru N, thank you very much for sharing your insights into the everyday realities of women street vendors in Kumasi, Ghana. I wish you all the best in your research.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the time you gave me and also your listeners. And I think you're doing an excellent job with your podcasts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you enjoyed this episode or learned something new, please consider subscribing to our page. You can also contribute by sharing this podcast with friends and colleagues who are interested in transport and mobility issues in Africa. If you are a researcher or practitioner working on transport in Africa and would like to share your work on this platform, feel free to reach out to me at chebechesifu@campus.technion.ac.il and we can discuss how to feature your work on this show. Until next time, I am your host, Polycarp Chebe. Thanks for listening and bye-bye.